wanted to begin today by sharing a photo of my family. I am the adorable one in the pink neon shorts and the multicolored striped shirt. Yes, I did dress myself. Clearly, this photo was taken a while ago. I'd like to think that I've grown a few more inches since then. But if I were to ask you, out of these 6 people, who do you think could speak fluent Mandarin? Who would you pick? I'll give you a hint. It's not me. And it's not the other Asian girl, also known as my sister. It's actually my oldest brother, the one in the tie-dyed shirt and glasses. He can speak fluent Mandarin. He actually went to college in Taiwan, and he currently is a Mandarin teacher. As for me and my story, my parents adopted me from China when I was a year old. In my family, I have my 2 older brothers and my older sister, who is also adopted from China. And no, before you ask, we are not related biologically. But after I was adopted, I lived in the US in Massachusetts until I turned 7. And then my parents got jobs in Taiwan, so that's where we moved to and where I went to an American international school and eventually graduated high school from. Basically, we'd spend the school years in Taiwan and then these summers back in the US in New Hampshire, because that's where my mom grew up. So both places, became home to me. Now, growing up, I have been asked the question, where are you from? A lot. And it always leaves me with 2 choices. Give the quick, easy answer, I'm from New Hampshire, or give the much longer, much more complicated answer where I quite possibly risk oversharing. But this question, where are you from? It doesn't leave me with a lot of room to answer it. I could say New Hampshire because I'm a US citizen, and that's where I spent every summer. But that answer feels incomplete. It feels like I'm leaving out a big part of who I am. On the other hand, I could say Taiwan, because that's where I lived for so long. But I'm not Taiwanese, which a lot of people pick up on. I've even had somebody look at me and say, "You're from Taiwan? You're really tan for a Taiwanese person." I mean, thank you. But they're right. My ethnicity is not Taiwanese. And then, of course, you have the people that look at me, and just because I'm Asian, they're like, "Oh yeah, she's Taiwanese." Or they just slap a Chinese label on me and call it a day. I've had people see me and think, "Oh, she must speak Mandarin," but which, as you know, is not true. Remember, if you need a translator, you go to my white older brother. And finally, it gets even trickier when you consider the history between Taiwan and China. I'll give you the quick rundown. Basically, back in 1949, after the Chinese Civil War, China split into 2. One side took over the mainland and formed the People's Republic of China, and then the losing side fled to an island, now known as Taiwan, and formed the Republic of China. The mainland developed into a communist party, and Taiwan became a democracy. Both sides claim that they are the real government of China, and even today, they still don't see eye to eye. So you can see why it's kind of awkward for me to say that I'm from Taiwan when my ethnicity is Chinese. But despite all of this, I'm not just Asian. You wouldn't look at a rainbow and just call it blue, right? No, a rainbow is what it is because of its many colors, and its complexity is what makes it beautiful. So thinking about this the other day, I kind of had a moment of panic working as a tour guide for SNHU, because one of the first questions that I ask on tour is, where are you from? And it struck me, maybe I should stop asking that question, especially because I know what it feels like to answer it. And that's when I realized that the issue isn't the question itself, but it's how and why we ask it. It's not that we should never ask this question ever again. It's not that we should never ask someone where they're from. Let's face it, this question is everywhere. It's in small talk, job interviews, your classes, at the grocery store. Most people ask this question out of genuine curiosity, and it comes from a place of wanting to learn and connect with others. But the thing is, because this question is asked so frequently, a lot of people don't realize that the impact that it can have on others. For example, I'm in college, and I can guarantee you that during the first week of classes, every single person is asking each other, where they're from. And, it's completely normal, and it's just to find something in common and to be able to say, hey, look, so-and-so is also from X, Y, and Z. But we need to realize that, this question can be quite limiting. It assumes that there's one singular answer, when identity isn't just one place. It's not just one culture, but it's a blend of experiences, influences, and stories. Take, for instance, the U.S. Census. Until the 2000s, Americans filing for the U.S. Census had to select one race category. And so if you were mixed race, you had to choose which part of your identity to claim. When the option to select multiple categories was finally added, more than 6.8 million people selected more than one box. And by 2020, that number grew to 33.8 million. And this is just within the US. This idea of needing to pick one is embedded in societies all around the world. But this rise in numbers is a clear sign that most people have complex identities. So to better connect with others and to ask this question more thoughtfully, I have developed a framework that I call the 3 R's: recognize, reflect, and respect. First, recognize. Recognize the complexity. You've seen my family photo. Most people would assume that my sister and I to be the ones to speak Mandarin. It's easy to make a quick judgment based on what you see on the outside. But the truth is, we can't judge a book by its cover. And this applies to all of us. We all are complex, and we all have parts of ourselves that aren't always obvious. Next, reflect. Reflect on the intent. Why are you asking? Are you genuinely interested in someone, or is it because they look or sound different? We need to understand that this question can be quite restricting. When I think of this in terms of my brother, and if you were to ask him, where he's from, he would say Massachusetts. But this question doesn't let him share the parts of his story that matter to him, like his experience in Taiwan and how that shaped who he is today. That's why it's so important for us to pause and reflect. How is it coming off to the other person? And what are you trying to get out of it? And finally, respect. Respect individual stories. We all have different stories, despite maybe even coming from similar backgrounds. I know that my siblings and I all have very different answers to the question, where are you from? But that's the beauty of it. We all have experiences, unique experiences that shape who we are. And we need to be able to respect those experiences as well as respect what matters to the person sharing. So with these 3 R's in mind, I've been trying to become more conscious of the question, where are you from? For example, going back to me as a tour guide, I know that it's a completely normal question to ask, especially within that certain situation, and that most people aren't thinking twice about it. But I'm not thinking about most people. I'm thinking about those that do. So now I ask, where are you coming from today? It's a small shift, but it changes the focus from being on a person's origin to their current journey. That way, I'm not putting anyone on the spot, about their background, and I'm providing the space for them to share what they want to. I found that most people will mention where they're from if they want to, without me having to ask. So this question allows them to more naturally take a lead in telling their own story. Now, I know the 3 R's might seem like a lot to take in and to keep track of, but it's actually easier to implement than you might think. In fact, the other day, a 6-year-old showed me just how easy it can be. I'm currently student teaching, and on the first day, I immediately noticed one student. He is the absolute cutest, and he's also Asian. And I found myself wondering, where in Asia he's from. Of course, I didn't ask that because 1, he's 6, and 2, as you've heard, it's not always the right question to ask. So, as I tell my students, that's an inside thought. It's an inside thought. Yeah. And I kept it inside and I let it be. And then one day, he comes up to me and he goes, "Miss Anderson, I have a question for you." And I go, "Of course, what's your question?" And he goes, "Are you part Filipino?" And I just looked at him and I laughed. I was like, "No, I'm sorry, I'm not part Filipino. I'm Chinese." And honestly, I'm so glad that you asked that question because I've been wondering the same thing about you. And he laughs and he goes, "Oh, I thought you might be Chinese. I'm part Filipino and half German." This curious boy recognized that I might have a mixed background, and rather than assuming, he respectfully asked a question that allowed us both to share more about ourselves. He started a conversation. And he wasn't trying to label me. He was simply trying to understand me and form a connection. And that's the ultimate goal, to form connections. But to do this, we need to rethink the way we approach identity. Like a rainbow, humans are made up of a spectrum of experiences, stories, and backgrounds. And just as my student showed me, magic happens when we stop viewing each other as one color and instead embrace the full array of what makes each of us unique. So the next time that you meet somebody new, instead of asking where they're from, try asking what their story is. That's how we shift from putting people in boxes to creating spaces where every story matters. Because at the end of the day, isn't that the world you want to live in? A world where we're not defined by where we come from, but by who we truly are. Thank you.